when you look at life control, the idea of having a high level of life control translates into action man or action woman, action person. But sometimes people who leap into things because they think they can do it find they actually couldn't. They've actually taken a step too far. We all have different default responses. So we will respond to an event in our own way. But if we're self-aware, it doesn't necessarily mean we can't respond in a different way. But we need to be self-aware. We need to understand what our default response is. If people can visualize achieving a task and feeling good about it, it's a source of motivation for them. It makes them want to get there. But not everybody can visualize from that. Some people will look at the task, they know it's important, but can't imagine what it would feel like to achieve it.
Hi there, welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast. This is the first of 8 episodes in this series, a series which will hone in on specific areas that are linked to this episode in particular. And today, we're going to dive into how mental toughness influences our creative juices and our decision making. So subsequently, our behavior and our performance under pressure. And that's what you can expect over the coming weeks from a range of different angles. Back to today. Today, I'm joined once again by Doug Strycharczyk, one of the key figures behind the development of mental toughness and the 4Cs framework and its psychometric foundations. Doug has spent over 3 decades working alongside Peter Clough and more recently Professor John Perry, helping to evolve mental toughness into a far more nuanced and sophisticated concept than many people realize. In this conversation, we explore how the 4Cs, control, commitment, challenge, and confidence, shape the way we think, feel, and act in high-pressure situations. We talk about why mental toughness isn't about being strong or weak, how default responses show up in exams, in sport, in leadership, in everyday life, and why self-awareness is the real game changer. If you're interested in better decisions, better performance, and a deeper understanding of yourself or others, this is a must listen. I think it's great to catch you again. I think this is the 3rd time you'll be featured on the podcast. Maybe we're probably going back a couple of years ago now since you were last on. Would you like to just share with the viewers and the listeners a little bit about yourself for those that don't know you?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. Great to be back, by the way. I'm Doug Strycharczyk. I'm the CEO of AQR International. And my role in the mental toughness world is to take the concept and put it into the hands of as many people on the planet as possible. I've been involved in the development of the concept and the psychometric measures that go with it for probably more than 30 years now. I started working with Peter Clough, supported him with his development work, and of course, he published the initial studies that create the technology that we work with today. But I've continued, and particularly working with Professor John Perry at Limerick University, we've been able to take our understanding of the concept to a new level, and it is now quite a sophisticated concept. So that's me.
Excellent. And a concept, yeah, that was well enough for a few time after doing the master training. So yeah, well, today's conversation, we're going to have a look at how it goes on to influence our decision making, our actions and behaviors there. So let's have a look at one of the high pressure decision making. Where does control fit into this? Where does it allow us to make some smart decisions, I wonder?
Okay, right. So I'll just preface it because my response, because if people aren't familiar with the mental toughness concept, the mental toughness concept is an aspect of your personality that describes your mental responses, your default mental responses when you need to do something. And it consists of 4 big components: control, challenge, and confidence. And we're going to explore control to start with. And control itself has got 2 key factors. One is life control, which some people see as the essence of control. And then there's emotional control. And that isn't the same as emotional intelligence, but it does connect with emotional intelligence. But if we look at life control is the extent to which it's a description of self-worth, the extent to which you see yourself as a worthwhile person. In other words, if I'm going to be asked to do something, I know, even if I haven't got the skills and knowledge to do it, I'm going to be able to have a go at it. I'm that useful a person. And so it often connects with this notion of can-do. The high levels of control tend to have a can-do attitude. People with the lower levels of control tend to be much more cautious and careful about approaching events. So when we're talking about getting things done, it would appear on the face of it that having a high level of life control is an advantage. And in some settings, it is. The interesting thing about the mental toughness concept is it isn't judgmental in the way that many other concepts are. So, for instance, we talk about growth and fixed mindset as if one is a good thing and one is a bad thing. When you look at life control, the idea of having a high level of life control translates into action man or action woman, action person. But sometimes people who leap into things because they think they can do it find they actually couldn't. They've actually taken a step too far or they've had to go at something that was actually beyond them. And so when you look at the people with a low level of life control, those are people who are more careful, more cautious. So they might be slower. Often they're judged as slow. But what they're doing is slowly building up a sense of self-worth. They'll tackle something. And they will sometimes come to the conclusion, I can't do this. And so they won't leap into the impossible task. But they doesn't necessarily mean they won't tackle the difficult task. They'll just make sure that they're capable of doing it. So that's an example of how this concept is beginning to explain how we respond to events. And that takes us in all aspects of mental toughness, and that's crucial. And that's this idea of self-awareness, because we are very quick to judge people. We tend to like people who get on with things. We tend to condemn people who are slow in the uptake. But actually, in lots of circumstances, the slower, more careful person has an advantage. And in many cases, the get up and go person has a big disadvantage. So what we're beginning to learn together is every situation demands its own response, and we all have different default responses. So we will respond to an event in our own way. But if we're self-aware, it doesn't necessarily mean we can't respond in a different way. But we need to be self-aware. We need to understand what our default response is.
Yeah, it's an interesting one there when going back to the life control part there and this essence of can do. It's just thinking about like high pressure moments and whether it's somebody sitting a test, an exam, shall we say. I guess like the sense of urgency, the emotion and the outcome, the consequence can really play a large part in people's creativity in that respect and that essence of can do or not.
Well, that's where the connection with the other aspect of control, the emotional control bit comes in, because uh, we all feel, we all have feelings to some degree. Some of us actually have quite a low level of feelings, but we all have feelings. So when something happens, like we've got to take that important place kick from the sideline and not from the centre of the pitch, we will feel that pressure. Some people are capable of managing that pressure. In fact, managing the pressure to perform even better than if they hadn't thought about it. They're able to channel that emotional energy into what they're doing. And so some people can manage that emotion, other people can't, and they won't be able to concentrate on it. And so you begin to see coping mechanisms for that. You'll see place kickers going through particular routines. I'll never forget Johnny Wilkinson. He looked like he was praying before he was taking a kick. Well, he was actually going through a routine that was putting him back into emotional control of that situation. I remember lots and lots of videos of Cristiano Ronaldo taking penalties. No matter what the goalkeeper was doing, bouncing up and down, he wasn't looking at the goalkeeper. He was only looking at the ball. He knew where the net was, and he wasn't allowing any distraction. So he would wait patiently until he was ready, then he'd hit the ball, because as we know in In soccer, if you hit the ball fast enough, there's hardly any goalkeeper on the planet going to save it unless it hits them.
That's right, yeah, and I think there's an argument to say visualization is one of the skills as well that he's learned over the years, and he's replaying time and time again exactly what he's going to do there. Well, I suppose to help control his emotions and to affect the outcome.
Absolutely. And of course, visualization is even more important in the next component of mental toughness. That's commitment. And that's, if we can move on to that, that has two subcomponents and they're kind of related. One is goal orientation, and that is much more about the extent to which we have a sense of purpose, our own sense of purpose. So if I'm asked to do something, I might be able to visualize, well, what is it I'm being asked to do? Why am I being asked to do it? And why is it worthwhile? Some of us can do that visualization, others can't. So again, there's a spectrum there. So people who will visualize what they're expected to do, and they'll be able to translate that into how well am I supposed to do it? That's where goals and targets come from. People can't. The other component of commitment is achievement orientation, and they should naturally flow one to the other, but they don't. Because achievement orientation is, can I visualize what it feels like? So there's a link back to emotional control involved to achieve that. And if people can visualize achieving a task and feeling good about it, it's a source of motivation for them. It makes them want to get there. But not everybody can visualize in that way. Some people will look at the task, they know it's important, but can't imagine what it would feel like to achieve it. You'll know that in the world of sports. I remember Peter Clough telling me that a lot of athletes build little podiums in their bedrooms, and before they go to bed, they go and stand on the podium to visualize standing on that podium and getting the winner's medal and so on. That's a source of motivation.
Yeah, just when we're talking about visualization there, like for the viewers, for the listeners, I guess it depends on where people are on their journey as well as their learning style. Yeah, visualization can be taught, can be learned, as can a lot of these skills that we'll talk about. Just one thing, if you are a good visual, then I guess again under pressure, you can start generating a variety of different options on how things can play out, which will link to creativity too. Whereas, yeah, visualization is more difficult for you, and obviously that's going to be a tough one.
Well, that's why when we talk about mental toughness, we talk about the default response. So it's a mental response you make without consciously thinking about it. It's not like thinking of, if I have number 3 plus 5, I can translate that into number 8. Somebody who is mentally sensitive might look at that and freeze. They won't see the numbers, so they won't be able to process the numbers. And that happens a lot in, say, exam situations. You mentioned that in the past. Some people will open an exam paper, they know the answer to every question, but the default response is to freeze. So, so when under pressure, you tend to go back to your default response if you're not self-aware that that's what you're going to do. If you're self-aware that about your likely response, you can do things like sit back and calm down for 5 seconds and then look at that exam paper and think, oh yeah, I can answer that question and get going.
Yeah, you'll have plan A, plan B, plan C up your sleeve only in order to, as you said, deal with that tricky situation in be it an exam. Going back to the commitment side, some people are natural goal setters and they'll of it. They'll take action, they'll follow through, get to their promises, and then so on and so forth. Whereas some people, they may set goals, but they might be the wrong kind of goals, and they can overthink. They can have this like a decision making paralysis. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's tripping over to achievement orientation. And you're right. Some people will look at the task, they know it's worthwhile, but in their minds, they may think, I'm not sure that's worth it. I can see other people getting excited about this. I don't think it's worth it. I'm not going to make the effort. And some people, the more mentally sensitive, and this is looking at the work that John Perry does, he's looking at the psychology behind all of this. He talks about people the more mentally sensitive, having lower mental and emotional reserves than a more mentally tough person. So if you've got lower mental and emotional reserves, then even a moderate task can look unappealing. And so that's why you think that person knows exactly what they're supposed to do. They talk a great job. They don't get on with it. And that's part of the explanation. They're just not geared up to make the effort.
So in some ways, is there an argument there to be able to help this person would be to educate them around goal setting, but not just solely the maybe the outcome, the performance, the process goals, but also how they go about it and allowing them periods of time to where it might take them a week to actually set the goals as opposed to just doing it in one whole full fell swoop and then feeling overwhelmed by the whole process.
Yeah, well, somebody who's got a much higher level of achievement orientation, you might give them 5 tasks and they'll get on and do it. Maybe somebody with a lower level of achievement orientation, that person can only tackle 1, maybe 2 tasks. Once they understand that about themselves, they don't try and tackle everything. And you can actually deplete your emotional reserves as well. So there's a kind of situational element to it. Again, John often talks about, he lives on the west coast of Ireland, not far from the sea. When he comes home from work in the summer, he puts his dog in a car, drives a couple of miles to the beach, and they go up and down the beach. And that dog knows that they're going to have a run up and down the beach and gets very excited. So for those 2 or 3 miles, his dog is whimpering, barking, getting excited, running around on the back street. And when John says, when he's in a good mood and he's had a good time, he's walked off a duck's back. He's had a bad day. Bear in mind, John is a more mentally tough character than most. He can just as likely turn around to the dog and scream at it, sit down, shut up.
Yeah.
So it is connected with your level of emotional and mental reserves,
You've just had me thinking about a recent podcast that I put out. So I interviewed a guy who was in the Guinness Book of World Records as an ultra marathon runner, and he was embarking on a run of 220 miles, and around about 80 miles in, he just hit a wall where he was about to give up. But he remembered what his coach had said to him. His coach had basically said, "Get something to eat, have a little sleep, and everything will feel very different in about an hour's time." So he did that, and then sure enough, they felt a lot different. And then yeah, he cracked on and he went and did really well in the ultra race.
Right.
But yeah, sometimes we've got to allow some space, haven't we, to be able to then follow through on tasks or just see things differently.
Yeah, and we have to understand if I'm a more mentally sensitive individual, I work with a smaller energy and a smaller fuel resource than somebody else. But it doesn't stop me ultimately from being able to achieve if I really think about it and can manage it. And curiously, there is a potential advantage in being. This is to illustrate the complexity of what we're talking about. There is an advantage in having a low level of, I've forgotten the term, not attention, achievement orientation. One of the consequences of having a high level of achievement orientation is you're very good at concentrating and you're very good at avoiding distraction. That's one of the things that helps you to achieve what you're supposed to do. People with a low level of achievement orientation don't have that capability. But curiously, one of the things that we're seeing that is being increasingly valued by society and by employers is something called curiosity. We kind of value people who look around and spot things and work with them and then turn them into ideas. People who've got low levels of achievement orientation tend to be more curious than people with high level achievement orientation. And when you think about it, it does make sense because curiosity requires letting the ideas from the periphery seep in. And if you're blocking them out, they don't seep in.
Yeah, well, no, because yeah, you're gonna be able to brainstorm. You might well get distracted. I guess, yeah, if you've got someone coaching and supporting you and helping you, they can then try and work with you to find a process to bring that all in together. As we wrap up today's episode, what really stands out for me is just how nuanced and complex mental toughness actually is, and something obviously that I've become more and more aware of as the years and as the conversations have gone by whilst hosting this podcast. Naturally, as we're at episode 302 now. And today, well, we've spent time unpacking 2 of the 4 C's of mental toughness: control and commitment. Next week, you're going to hear more from Doug when he discusses the other 2 C's, confidence and challenge. And what I took from this conversation was a little reminder that mental toughness isn't about being tougher. It isn't about feeling like you can attack every single decision or that you should be more stoic than others. It's about understanding your default responses: life control, emotional control, goal orientation, and achievement orientation. These aren't labels to judge ourselves by. They're lenses. They help us understand why we act the way we do under pressure, why some situations drain us more than others, and why what works brilliantly for one person might not work for someone else. A big theme running through this episode is self-awareness. When we know our tendencies, whether we rush, freeze, overthink, or avoid, we give ourselves options. And options, well, they're powerful. They allow us to adapt rather than react. Another important takeaway is energy. Mental and emotional reserves matter. Sometimes the most mentally tough decision isn't to push harder, but to reflect, to refuel, and to come back with clarity. So here's a question I'm going to leave you with. When the pressure hits, are you responding out of habit or out of choice? And if you're aware of your default response, how might that change the way you approach your next challenge? And a big thank you too for listening or viewing. I hope you're going to tune in next week to hear more from Doug, where he shares some more fascinating insights. Have a great week. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.